you know, the crew here, whether that's the wonderful Glenn Jones, Glenn Jones, whether it's Ben, whether it's me, whether it's Shoebox, you know, we're all here. Jesse, Director Jesse's here. Hashtag SCGCIN to join in the conversation with everyone that's here at this event. We've got game 3 here. Michael Tabler on the left with High Tide, Jacob Hollon on the right with Esper Stoneblade.
And who would you want to be in this matchup?
I have to say, I really like High Tide in this matchup. We'll have to pull up Jacob Hollon's sideboard to see what he has access to in order to fight this. So what are his weapons in this matchup?
So Jacob, on the Esper Stoneblade side, on the right side of your screen, has a Flusterstorm, which is a nice card against those combo decks that are casting, you know, non-creature spells. He's got an extra Force of Will in his sideboard that I'm sure we'll see come in. He has 3 Surgical Extraction, really nice against High Tide, nicer even than it is against some other combo decks, because High Tide is one that casts a lot of spells, fills up its graveyard, gives you a lot of nice targets for that Surgical Extraction. I also think we'll see this sort of Feast and Famine come in to try to keep his High Tide opponent low on cards. High Tide can go off with very few cards, but it's not nearly as easy, so they're off.
A quick recap of the first 2 games. In game 1, Michael brain freezed after going on the combo, and in game 2, it was exactly what you talked about, those surgical extractions being used to stop the combo.
Yeah, I think they'll be very important in this matchup. From Michael, we see just an island, but you know, in this matchup with High Tide, an island can be quite a bit more. From Esper Stoneblade, we see a Tundra fetched out, I think that might have actually been the Tundra that fooled me earlier today. A nice little altered art there. And from Jacob, we're going to see a Ponder.
An altered Ponder. A thank you to Twitter user MagicZY37. Apparently, the people around these parts call him Derek Little D. Now, Derek, the person that we were talking about in the quarterfinal match earlier, he is a fairly young player. I believe we were told he was 14 or 15, but I don't have confirmation on that. In this, 14 is the age that that Derek is, who's going to be our semifinalist. Michael Tabler here with High Tide versus Jacob Hollon.
We saw a Ponder on Jacob's turn. Michael just adds another island. Michael's game plan basically with High Tide is to play a lot of islands and then use the namesake card High Tide to make them all produce an additional mana per High Tide cast. Gets them all going, uses various cards in his deck to untap them, Candelabra, Time Spiral, and doesn't go infinite usually, but goes, might as well be infinite. We see him here use a Force of Will to counter, or attempt to counter, that Stoneforge Mystic that comes down and threatens to be sort of this army in a can where you can fetch Batter Skull, Sword of Feast and Famine, any of those options. Michael just adds another island. Myself, as someone who's played a bit of High Tide, this looks good for Michael. I mean, I can't see his hand, but what you want to do is you want to play an island every turn, and you don't want to die.
Yeah, that pitched card was a turnabout.
Another one of the cards that Michael can use to untap all of his lands and produce just a lot more mana for each High Tide that he has going. We see a Brainstorm here from Jacob.
We were talking in a previous round about the use of Turnabout as a kind of mana short. If Michael Tabler uses that in this fashion, what he can do is potentially tap down at the end of Jacob's turn all of Jacob's lands, and that will make Jacob's Spell Pierce, Flusterstorm, and Counterspell that he has in his deck not cards that can be used during the turn where Michael tries to win.
And speaking of Flusterstorm, we see 2 of them right here. We see Brainstorm cast, we see Flusterstorm cast in response, and we see a Flusterstorm from Jacob going back at the storms of Michael. Not even sure quite how that all resolved itself, but it looks like the Brainstorm is happening here. And Brainstorm to Jacob's graveyard, puts a couple cards back, and drops a Polluted Delta that will allow him to shuffle away whatever he did not want from his hand. Looks through, deciding what land to get.
If you're
Passes by an underground sea.
If you're just joining us, I'm Adrian Sullivan here with Ben Hayes. You can see Esper Stoneblade slowly trying to just, I guess, find ways to disrupt Michael, hopefully put a clock into play at some point. He can't hang around forever. Flusterstorm is a great answer to a card like Brain Freeze, but there are only one Flusterstorm in Jacob's whole 75 card list, which means he'll have to Snapcaster that Flusterstorm if he wants to get use out of it.
Yeah, so it's going to be rough for him. Snapcaster is not the way that you want to be going about that. One nice thing about Flusterstorm is it makes all those copies of itself. It's hard to fight against. If you have to play it through a Snapcaster, you can just counter the Snapcaster and it's not going to come back. We see a Candelabra come down here from Michael, and looks like he may be passing the turn. He indicated something there. Michael thinking about his options. Pretty important for the, plays a Scalding Tarn. Pretty important for the High Tide deck to play a land every turn. Because High Tide doubles, or well, not doubles, but adds a blue each time an island taps here. He needs a lot of islands to really go off, and in this game you see a scrub land come down from Jacob, and an Engineered Explosives for 1, threatening to take out that Candelabra, and he goes ahead and does that before anything crazy can happen. Scalding Tarn gets sacrificed. I think we'll just see another island coming out here.
Okay.
And neither player with well, a little bit of back and forth so far, but Jacob, I think, really needs to present something in this matchup that Michael has to deal with, and that hasn't been the case so far. Michael's been able to develop. Jacob was able to take out his Candelabra. A nice victory for him, but we'll see how we'll see how it plays out. Michael has what seems like quite a lot of time, which is not what you want to give your High Tide opponent.
Yeah. The sculpting power of a deck that basically is all instant search. Every turn that you let them do that, it's just yet another step towards death.
Yeah, unfortunately for Jacob, we just saw that it looks like Michael may only have one card in hand. Oh, wow. Okay. A time spiral that he might have used to reset and draw a bunch of gas gets taken out by Thoughtseize. Just one land before Michael's able to cast it.
And it looks kind of unfortunate, though. Jacob, after clearing the last card out of Michael Tabler's hand, says go. I mean, I think that you said that you saw a Snapcaster in that hand. Is that correct?
No, I think he used a... I think we were talking about Snapcaster as potential on that Flusterstorm, although I think I saw a Surgical.
A Surgical? Okay. Well, a Surgical would be good, but I mean, if Jacob is completely saying go here after clearing the way, he's hiding his hand from us pretty well here, but... has
those nice Jetpack Penguin sleeves. And Michael also hiding his hand.
Okay. And we're going to try to be cautious about our vocal levels here so that we don't give away anything to the players on the other side of the room. I see 2 lands. 1 land now after he lays a Flooded Strand. And he fetches it during upkeep, that looked like, of his opponent? If so, I mean, I really, I'm a big fan of keeping your fetch lands in play so that you can use Brainstorms to huge effect. Yes, you can thin out your library, but I prefer it as a Brainstorm shuffler than thinning out a small percentage of my deck.
Yeah, you know, in newer formats, keeping those lands in your hand to bluff something is important. In older formats, keeping the fetch lands uncracked, but also just keeping lands in your hand, not playing them out, having something to put away if you do draw that Brainstorm. It's nice to build up a hand, and we see another land played here.
Land go. Michael Tabler building up a hand of his own. And you see Pact of Negation, Force of Will, and I don't know what else.
Yeah, it looked like a blue card, though, which is not that surprising. If he's not playing an island, most of the other cards in his deck are blue.
Michael Tabler, land go. He's got 6 now. He can time spiral off the top.
We see a Spell Pierce from Jacob. We see a Force of Will, Surgical Extraction, and Spell Pierce in Jacob's hand, and a couple other spells.
Now, there was a moment where he had that Surgical Extraction, and Michael had an empty hand. I don't know. I mean, maybe it's wrong, but a part of me would have loved to have just hit the time spirals right then when it was clear.
Yeah, definitely an option. It would have...
that could be wrong, but I don't know.
Well, it would have limited the ways that Michael has to really go up high on card advantage. He would still have a Blue Sun Zenith, but it would definitely limit his options.
We see a Snapcaster Mage decide to hit the table and create a 9-turn clock here.
Yeah, and just flashing back a Ponder there. I would think that that Jacob didn't fire off that Surgical Extraction. He's probably trying to save it for a High Tide. It's probably the card he wants to hit.
High Tide does make it much harder for Michael Tabler to go off. He would have to go off on what's called Low Tide, which is much harder without the access to Thawing Glaciers that was used a million years ago. Low Tide going off requires turnabouts very slowly building up your mana, and it's practically impossible to pull off.
Yeah, if Jacob is able to hit a High Tide with that Surgical Extraction, he's in a great position, so I can understand him holding on to that, trying to get the most value out of it. And Inquisition. Discard spells, very good here for Jacob.
Michael Tabler thinking about his hand.
I think I see a Brainstorm.
Looks like he's hard-casting Force of Will.
Hard-cast Force of Will just stops that Inquisition, or at least tries to. We'll see what Jacob has. Jacob one mana short, it looks like, of casting his own Force of Will, but he does have a Spell Pierce.
Yeah, there is a Spell Pierce.
And now Michael has options. And we are going to see that Brainstorm try to hide away anything important that Inquisition could take. We'll see if he's able to put a couple cards back and maybe have that Inquisition whiff.
And then we're actually going to get an opportunity to see what Michael Tabler has been hiding. We won't know what's hidden on top of the deck any more than Jacob Hollon will, but I know we've been trying to guess and surmise, and Michael is just keeping the cards from being seen.
Yeah, we see what I think is a Candelabra up front there, that Pact of Negation you mentioned earlier, and Merchant Scroll are the cards we've identified so far.
If you're just joining us, this is the final match of the quarterfinals of our Star City Games Open Series event, and I'm Adrian Sullivan here with Ben Hayes. You can see on the left, Michael Tabler with High Tide. He's in the midst of being Inquisition on the stack.
Yeah, there's a pretty big stack here, actually. Inquisition, Force of Will, Spell Pierce, and then Brainstorm. Brainstorm's just resolving, and I think we're going to see the rest of the stack unravel here. Spell Pierce counters the Force of Will.
Look at that.
Okay. The Brainstorm wasn't able to hide quite everything from that Inquisition. He's going to have a choice of either the Pact of Negation or the Candelabra. There's a Time Spiral in there too, which he can't take, but it's pretty important in this match.
You know what I really like right now is taking that Pact of Negation, and then after you let that resolve, using the Surgical to take out the Time Spiral in the graveyard, and thus hit the Time Spiral in Michael Tabler's hand, and also shuffle away the 2 cards hidden by the Brainstorm.
Yeah, I think that could be a really strong play that would set Michael back pretty far. We'll see if Jacob, whether or not he sees that play, and whether or not he chooses to go with that play. Inquisition resolves. Jacob shuffles a Force of Will to the front of his hand, and looking at, actually I think that's 2 Surgical Extractions.
Oh, Doctor.
And we are going to see
Numero
first
uno
come down, and I would not be surprised if he's targeting that Time Spiral. So Michael, yep, lays down that Time Spiral.
Boom. Ouch.
And a
huge
blow to the High Tide player.
He checks to see what was put on top. I know that looked like a Merchant Scroll was hidden amongst other things.
Yeah, an important, little edge to get if you are in a situation like this and your opponent has just cast Brainstorm. Take a look, see what they hid, see what they're thinking is, how they're planning to try to get in that game. It allows you to try to not let them do that, basically.
So, 2 cards still in Jacob Hollon's hand, a Force of Will and a second Surgical Extraction, and he passes the turn back to Michael Tabler.
Yeah, and he has plenty of lands too, so if he is able to untap, he will easily be able to hardcast that Force of Will. We see a card drawn by Michael. We'll see if it's does enough. It is not a terribly
Why
fast.
not?
Wow.
Let's draw 3. What the heck?
Very reminiscent of those Sphinx's Revelations we saw in Standard. Just off the top, yeah, I'll draw a bunch of cards.
I am really happy that Michael just did that and didn't decide to be sneaky and wait, because he does remember he might not know. He does not want to open himself up to the potential of that card not resolving.
Yeah, and if he had passed, Jacob would have had plenty of lands to hardcast that Force of Will, even though he does not have another blue card in hand. So Michael here drawing 3, shuffling back in Blue Sun Zenith.
And let's see if that gave him enough gas. There's a fetch land.
Yep, Scalding Tarn. Jacob with a couple of good cards for this matchup, but Michael able to get 3 off of his draw step. And we'll see what he starts with. Looks like a Brainstorm.
Main phase Brainstorm, best kind of Brainstorm. I heard somebody call it a main storm today. I liked that a lot. That was nice. Wow.
Stoneforge Mystic, Jace, and Wasteland.
What a bunch of gas. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, so
I hope my wow wasn't too loud. It probably was.
We see Jacob with a few options here. He probably wants to get that Jace on the table, but at the same time, leaving open Force of Will is obviously very important against a combo deck. So we'll see how he chooses to play this. Would not be surprised to see Jace come down and immediately Brainstorm to try to give Jacob a blue card to turn on that Force of Will. See 4 mana, and Jace
Boom
is cast. Anything from Michael?
And
ooh,
wow, he goes beatdown. He +2s it right away.
And Fate Seal, maybe not being as effective as it might be, given that fetch land, but fetch land gets cracked right away anyway. And there we go, an island on top. Goes right into play for Michael off that Scalding Tarn. He's gonna shuffle and see what this draw step can give him.
That's a really aggressive Jace there.
Yeah, I'm not sure what Jacob left himself with in hand, but it looks like there are just 2 cards there. And Surgical and Force of Will, so he can't cast that Force of Will this turn.
This could be a good moment.
Yeah, Ponder.
I think I saw land, something. Don't know what the something was.
Sort of half the shields down.
Merchant Scroll.
And we'll see what that gets. He is
Here's
going to
a
go for High Tide. Interesting thing about High Tide, though, the effect is symmetrical. So as soon as Michael casts that High Tide, if Jacob realizes that it works for both players, he will be able to have his plains for 1 mana. There's 2 islands there for an additional 4, and he'll be able to hardcast that Force of Will.
Yeah. I have a feeling that Jacob knows.
And we'll see what Michael chooses to do here.
Michael checking his graveyard to see basically what's left in his deck. I would be unsurprised if Michael has his own deck list memorized to the card.
And
we're going to bring our volume down even more. One of the things that's problematic is even less people are here now, as we've had people eliminated from this tournament and they and their friends have left. Now there's only a small handful of people in the hall.
yeah, not much white noise left to cover up our commentary. And Jacob untaps and picks up that Stoneforge Mystic that we mentioned earlier.
Okay, we're leaning ever closer to the mics. Microphone check, 1, 2. What is this? Okay. We see Jace not going beatdown this time, going for the control. He's doing the brainstorm, the 0 ability. One of the things I think we're going to try to do from now on in, while we have so few people in the room, is we're going to only comment on public knowledge as best as we can, just so that we can try to avoid giving anything away about hands.
We see Jacob having brainstormed with Jace, so that's the path he's chosen to take with that. Snapcaster comes across, continuing to eat away at Michael's life total. And we see Stoneforge Mystic come down, threatening to really substantially increase the clock that Jacob's presenting. And Jacob chooses to go with a Sword of Feast and Famine to hopefully not let Michael build up too much more of a hand.
Now, Jacob playing this fairly patiently here. He can start using the Feast and Famine to eat away at Michael's hand next turn if he wants.
Yeah, we could have seen him cast the Stoneforge pre-combat, cast the sword and equip, but that would have left him with not enough mana to cast Force of Will, so would have left him with even more of those shields down.
Now Michael, he knows that time is running out. If we look at this in-board, it practically looks like a modified standard from about 2 years ago.
Yeah, we see Jace, Stoneforge Mystic, Snapcaster Mage, and Cunning Wish coming down from Michael. And we'll see if that resolves. Michael breaks out his sideboard. We see the options of Blue Sun Zenith, Brain Freeze, Echoing Truth to get rid of problematic permanents, and not sure what he's going to go with. He does go with that Blue Sun Zenith, so looking to try to draw a bunch of cards. We know Michael has some protection from that particular card available, but we'll see if, or sorry, that Jacob has protection from that card. We'll see if Michael can counter back with something. I believe I saw a turnabout in his hand.
Merchant Scroll.
See a Merchant Scroll for, if it resolves, we'll see what it's for.
Yep, we will see what it's for. We're going to try to avoid conjecture. We're going to try to avoid strategy commentary, just because at this point there's so little stopping our voices from reaching the players. I mean, I'm going to guess that they may be 50 yards away, but they can still hear us. Things echo in rooms this big.
Yeah, definitely. And we see a Pact of Negation on the table there for Michael. Can only assume that was what he chose with Merchant Scroll.
On Twitter, for get to the jet skis, the answer is yes.
We see a High Tide come down from Michael.
And High Tide, what will happen here? This is always an interesting fight. When you are the opposing blue player and the opponent casts a High Tide, they're generally better at using it than you, but at the same time, you get the same effect, so it's a conundrum. Which way do you do?
Yeah, if this High Tide resolved, Jacob is going to have access to quite a lot of mana, and we'll see what he can do with that. Looks like a hand of Sword of Feast and Famine, Surgical Extraction, and Force of Will. 5 mana. Just looking to Force of Will that High Tide. We see a Pact of Negation.
Oh my goodness gracious. Jacob Hollon tapped 5 lands here. And look at him, he puts his hand down.
Yep, he may be looking to try to hit that High Tide with Surgical Extraction, but you know that's going to be after it's resolved. So It's going to be potentially very bad news for Jacob, even if he does manage to remove all of the high tides. We see a candelabra coming down. And will Jacob respond to this? Yes, he does. Pulls the trigger on surgical extraction. And looks like they're creating a stack here. Candelabra on the bottom, and then surgical extraction over that. We'll see if Michael has any responses. 3 lands tapped. Effectively 6 mana. We'll see a turnabout. Michael's going to untap his own lands. And
I predict he will leave himself with mana for turnabout up and do as much of this Blue Sun Zenith feigning as a stroke of genius as he can dare.
Yeah, it looks like 7 islands there, I'm counting.
Now, he's leaving a lot back, but remember, he has no time spirals left in his deck.
So taps 4 islands for 8 mana. Blue Sun Zenith gets added to the stack above Candelabra and Surgical Extraction, looking to draw another High Tide and be able to cast it before all of those are removed by Surgical Extraction. And we'll see what this Blue Sun Zenith comes up with.
At this point, I believe we have no known information in either player's hands. The storm count is at, I believe, 9, and the tide at 2, lands tapping for 2 mana.
We actually know that Jacob has that Sword of Feast and Famine.
Oh, that's correct. Thank you. Thank you for that.
So he has no defenses left besides the Surgical Extraction that's currently on the stack. Michael can do whatever he wants this turn. We'll see what he does.
Oh, boy.
Force of Will, targeting that Surgical Extraction.
The storm count at 9. Surgical to the yard, Candelabra in play. A lot of mana available for Michael Tabler. And I believe that he has 5 cards in hand currently.
Yeah, seems to be counting up the storm count. Even more importantly than us knowing that that Feast of Famine is there, Michael knows that that Feast and Famine is there because the Stoneforge Mystic was cast, and he knows that the coast is clear.
Storm at 10, tide at 3, mana at 1.
See another High Tide. And, oh, no.
Mana at 0, storm at 11, tide at 4. That means his island's tapped for 4.
Taps 2.
Gets him 8 mana, untaps all of his land, and has 1 mana floating.
1 mana floating and access to 7 times 4 there. We'll see what he has as a follow-up. Can make just about 1 million mana if he has something to do with it. Ooh,
Ponder. Does he have anything else, though? I mean, I don't know if I saw anything.
I think I see a couple of lands.
I mean, besides lands, I mean spells.
Yeah, I don't think I see anything as far as business goes. Looking at 3, shaking his head, putting them back.
Gets a brainstorm, I think. He's got 3 mana after casting this. The storm now at 13. Brainstorm, 1, 2, 3.
Okay. Michael nodding a bit. He may be happy with what he's found.
I see a Force of Will. Puts back his 2 cards for the brainstorm. Lays a fetch land.
And one of those cards he put back looked like Force of Will, so he knows he's not going to need that this turn.
And that's his land for the turn. Fetches and shuffles away. With any luck, for Michael anyway, not for Jacob. With any luck, he has another search spell or perhaps a, you know, if it's a Merchant Scroll or a Blue Sun Zenith, I think the game might have just gone away.
Yeah, we see...
Cunning Wish might also do it.
We see 8 islands there for Michael, 1 of them tapped, and currently his islands produce 4 blue mana each.
Shuffle, shuffle, shuffle.
And there is an uncracked Flooded Strand on Jacob's side, so he has access to as many as 5 blue mana if he has another blue land in his deck. Not going to matter with that Sword of Feast and Famine in hand.
He's just double checking his storm count here.
Yeah, players confirming that. Michael may be thinking about.
Oh, jeez.
Oh, I think that's a cunning wish.
That looked like a cunning wish to me.
Yeah, and he has to keep track of storm count because he already fetched up the blue sun zenith in his board with an earlier cunning wish.
That empties out the mana pool. That gets him the 14th. The brain freeze the 15th. That's 45 cards knocked away. Michael Tabler pushing on through. High Tide defeating Esper Stoneblade. Whew. Good times.
Yeah, you know, a little bit of back and forth there when Jacob resolved Jace. It seemed like he was favored. Michael didn't have much of a hand, but draw steps, you know, just went turn after turn, picked up a blue sun zenith, was able to get a little bit back into that game, and then took that to the win.
Okay.